Good morning, everyone. This morning I said I was going to talk what I've learned from almost 60 years of practicing meditation. So I wrote down a few things, but I think it would take me almost 60 years to give this talk. So I'll try to condense it down. But what I want to give just a little bit of background how I got to this place. And when I was a graduate student in the 1960s at Berkeley, a graduate student in physics, I first encountered Zen. And it was published, when it was first published in 1965, I bought a hardcover copy of The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau, or actually it was compiled by Philip Kapleau, and it had stories of enlightenment experiences and how to practice. And prior to that, there were just philosophical tracts by D.T. Suzuki and Alan Watts. I was so inspired, by reading about the practice of people that I bought a Zafu and Zabuton and started practicing on my own just from the instruction from the Three Pillars of Zen. And then in the 1960s, Zen Master Shunryu Suzuki was becoming well known in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. He arrived from Japan in 1959 and founded the San Francisco Zen Center, which was on Bush Street. And what I recall was going to a free rock concert in the panhandle of Golden Gate Park. And it featured the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane, Country Joe and the Fish, and Suzuki Roshi. And between sets, he would sit cross-legged on the stage and spout Zen wisdom. At least I thought it was wisdom. I couldn't understand what he was saying, and because of his encrypted English, but his presence was so engaging, and his laugh and smile so infectious that I decided to join him at Bush Street for Zazen. And it was challenging, but I was motivated, and I didn't give up, even though my mind never seemed to slow down, and my knees never seemed to stop hurting. So I completed my requirements for my PhD in 1967 and was offered a research job in England at the British Atomic Energy Research Establishment. But before packing up and trekking to Europe, I spent a week at Tassajara at the invitation of a friend, and Tassajara is the first Zen monastery, which was built in this country. And in the summer of 1967, they had their first training period, and it was very rigorous, but I wasn't a formal student. So but I did sit meditation and learn the oryoki, the Zen eating bowls, but I got to soak in the magnificent hot pools and lay in the sun while the trainees were tests. It did seem rigid and harsh, but it was only over the years I learned how rigorous Zen training really is, but I found that there was much joy in that serious practice. So I spent 2 years in England trying to find a Zen group to practice with. but I was out in the English countryside, and there were plenty of Indian emigres, and they were all Hindus. But I attended some satsangs and practiced with them, but it didn't really resonate with me the way that Zen did. But in '69, I moved to London and heard about Sochu Suzuki Roshi, a Zen master coming to visit London. And he was invited to teach at the Buddhist Society by Christmas Humphreys, who was the society's president. Christmas Humphreys wrote a number of books on Zen Buddhism. And Sochu Roshi was the abbot of Ryotakaji Monastery, which was actually founded by Hakuin. And it's on the slopes of Mount Fuji in Japan. So Christmas Humphreys introduced Sochu Roshi to a large crowd at the first meeting at the Buddhist Society. And when they realized that all Sochu Roshi wanted them to do was practice Zazen and not sit around and talk about it, most of them left. And there was it dwindled to just a handful of us who really wanted to practice. And during that visit, he spent a year in London, and we meditated every day. And once a month, we had a session from 2 to 5 days where we would sit 8 or 9 hours in meditation. And he held the space. He did everything. I mean, we were all novices. None of us had any experience. And he gave talks, which were translated because his English was almost non-existent. From him, I learned that chicken and kitchen have exactly the same phonetic syllables, but they're reversed. But he was going to go to the chicken to fix lunch. But he gave the talks, he held the private interviews, and he led the chanting, and he played all of the instruments, and he prepared all the meals, and he taught us again how to use the oryoki, the eating bowls, and to eat mindfully. And when he returned to Japan, I continued to sit with a small group of Sangha friends. And we kept it up until he returned shortly before New Year's in 1971. And I returned to the United States in 1972 in March. And first I had a job as an oceanographer in the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla. But first I stopped in New York to attend a session with Sochu Roshi, which was very profound and cemented my determination to follow the Buddha path. So shortly after I landed in Southern California, I went to the Zen Center of Los Angeles for a session, and I met Maizumi Roshi, who became my root teacher. And I remember our first meeting as being very sweet. He was kind and encouraging, and he knew Sochu Roshi and was pleased that I had some previous training, and he spoke quite good English. He encouraged me to continue working on the Koan Mu, which I was doing, and I made a heart connection with him, and I continued to study with him until his death some 23 years later. But Maizumi Roshi was empowered by teachers in both the major Zen lineages, Soto and Rinzai. And the Soto school is a school of meticulous practice. It's a school of silent illumination that emphasizes proper Zazen, will eventually lead to awakening. In contrast, the Rinzai school is more vigorous and uses koans to push the students beyond their conceptual minds directly to awakening. So Maizumi Roshi, or Roshi as we called him, was born into a family of Soto priests. and his father gave him transmission in the Soto lineage. And all the forms that we adopted at Zen Center of Los Angeles were from the Soto tradition, and what forms we have here are also carried on, but not completely. Because in the Soto tradition, everyone sits facing the wall, and in the Rinzai tradition, people sit facing the center. And we sit facing the center in our Zendo primarily because of the low windows, and the people sitting facing the wall would be busily watching all the squirrels and birds and traffic passing by. But that's not the only reason, because we feel that facing each other, it's more intimate connection and practice too. So when Maizumi Roshi was a student in the university, he lived in a dojo with Koryo Roshi, who was a lay Zen Rinzai teacher. So he studied koans with Koryu. And then when he came to the United States, he met Yasutani Roshi, who and served as his translator, and became a student of Yasutani Roshi, who was a Soto priest, whose teacher, Harada Roshi, abandoned the Soto sect and started bringing in Rinzai teachings, koan, so they combined Soto and Rinzai. And so he became successors of both Koryu Roshi and Yasutani Roshi. And by coincidence, Yasutani Roshi is the main Roshi in the three pillars of Zen, which got me started. So after working at the University of California in San Diego, and of which the Scripps Institution of Oceanography is a part, I left academia and decided to go to LA, and I was invited to join the staff there. So I ordained as a monk and pursued a vigorous path of practice with Maizumi Roshi. I finished all the koan curriculum with him in about 1985 and served as an assistant teacher, and I received Dharma transmission 34 years ago in 1990. And I've been continuously teaching with hardly a break since that time. And when I first arrived at Zen Center of LA, the senior disciple was Bernie Glassman, or Tetsugen was his Dharma name. And it was his energy and drive that was responsible for the rapid growth of the Zen Center of Los Angeles. But when I first met him, I found him as impenetrable as Mu. He was not very personable, but I came to realize that he just wanted everyone who sat with him to awaken to their Buddha nature. And he felt at the time that intense, no-nonsense Zazen was the way to do it. But as the years went on, he softened, and I also opened up, and we became quite close. And I consider Bernie, who died in 2019, to be a close mentor. And Bernie gave me Inca in 2006, which is empowerment as a Roshi. So that was almost 20 years ago. And Bernie, a few years later, empowered Roshi Shinko to be the abbess of Maitreya Abbey, and that same weekend he officiated at our wedding, and that was 12 years ago. So that's my story. It reminds me of some of you know who R.D. Laing is, Ronnie Laing. He was a psychiatrist in London who was a very radical psychiatrist. And when I lived in London, I got to know him, but I was at a talk he was giving, and somebody asked him, how does somebody get to do the kind of psychology or psychiatry that you do? And he thought for a minute, and then he told his life story, and he said, that's one way to do it. So this is one way to do it. Okay. So what did I learn from all that training and teaching? So I'll paraphrase the Buddha. In my many years of practice, I haven't gained anything, but I've let go of a lot. The Buddha said that everyone, without exception, has the wisdom and virtue of the Buddha. We're all intrinsically as complete and spacious and as virtuous as the Buddha. Yet we obscure that truth with all kinds of attachments, opinions, judgments, projections, and deluded thoughts. If we can just let go of these obscurations, our intrinsic wisdom will shine through. So what is it that prevents us from being able to let go of all these attachments? And this is what I learned. It always comes down to our image of who we think we are and our persistent attempts to maintain and protect that image. One thing I learned is that there's no fixed abiding self. That fact is hard for most people to swallow. How can I function if there's no self? Can you believe that the notion of a fixed self is just that, a notion, a concept, an idea? And even the teaching of no self is a concept. Concepts can be used to guide, but they're not the experience itself. Some concepts can lead us astray. They're like conspiracy theories. Other concepts can guide us to experiences that lead to the lessening of suffering. But remember, the concepts are like the fingers pointing to the moon. They're not the moon. Just like the map is not the territory, or the menu is not the meal. Our practice is beyond words and letters. What that means is that our concepts do not describe the experience of awakening, insight, or enlightenment. The best we can say is that the self cannot be grasped. It is unknowable. The more we are able to let go of our attachments, the clearer the moon of wisdom will shine within us. So I did not gain anything, but I did let go of attachments that obscured my original self. But it's an endless practice. It's not like I did it once and that was the end of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's another thing that I learned from almost 60 years of practice: how to be comfortable with the unknown. Our life and our practice is a continual stepping into the unknown. There's no fixed ground upon which to stand. What do we really know? We don't know what will happen in the next minute or the next year. And part of our problem is that we think we know what is to be good or what is to be bad, but we never know. You probably all know the story of Mr. Sai and the horse, so I won't repeat that. But in my own life, I can think of many situations that appeared to be bad or tragic or unfortunate that did not turn out to be that way. In 1969, when I was living in England working as a research physicist, I lined up my next job in Paris to continue my physics research. Unfortunately, my wife at the time had a nervous breakdown and we could not travel. And I couldn't take the job in France. We were in London and I was without a job. I eventually landed a gig as a science journalist for the New Scientist magazine. And shortly thereafter, I heard about Soichi Roshi coming to visit. And the rest is history. If my wife had not gotten sick, and if we had gone to France, I would not have met Soichi Roshi. And maybe I wouldn't have found my true path to Zen. Yeah, I don't know. But at least that's the story. Maybe I would have won a Nobel Prize in physics. But I did read a story of Nobel Prize winners that they become much more anxious after they win the prize than before they won it. Now they're expected to be brilliant all the time and to know about everything and to be able to spout wisdom continuously. I think I prefer Zen, where I can say I don't know when you ask me a clever question. In 1992, after I received Dharma transmission from Izumi Roshi, I went back into the job market to support my new family. And I eventually became the vice president in charge of technology for Compton's New Media. It was a company owned by Encyclopedia Britannica. But shortly thereafter, they were sold to the Tribune Company. And the Tribune Company is best known for the Chicago Tribune, but they also owned that popular TV station in Chicago, WGBH, I think it is, and the Chicago Cubs, and they owned paper-making factories in Canada, and they owned newspapers and TV stations all over the country. And one of my fellow managers, who was the vice president of sales, he said, I'm leaving, I'm going to go find another job. And I said, why? He says, well, the Tribune is this, they're like seagulls. They'll swoop in, eat up everything, shit all over the place, and fly away. And he was right. They fired every high management person, including me, and to bring in their own people. But eventually, the company went down. So there I was again, without a job to support my family. But through my contacts, I was able to be hired as the director of electronic publishing for Merriam-Webster Dictionary Company. But the best part was that I could work from home. So I was living in California at the time, and Merriam-Webster's in Massachusetts. So I was invited to teach in Colorado during that time, and I eventually moved here and founded Great Mountain Zen Center. And I was able to do that because I was working from home. And I was able to write my first Zen book, the Book of Equanimity, while working at Merriam-Webster. I mean, I was free to schedule my time as long as I completed my projects. They never knew what I was doing, when or where, which reminds me of that cartoon of these two dogs sitting at a computer, and one says to the other, the best thing about the internet is they don't know you're a dog. So one of the reasons we're sitting here today is because I got fired by the Tribune Company and hired by Merriam-Webster. I'll tell one more story, which I don't think my daughter would mind. It's about her. And the reason I'm telling these stories is because to let you know that we don't know what's going to happen. And these are personal stories in my life that I'm sharing with you. And I'm sure that each one of you has your own stories, you know? So in 2009, my teenage daughter, unwed, got pregnant. In the summer, she was to graduate. She graduated from high school. And the young man wanted nothing to do with it. And many of her friends and family told her to get an abortion. But she refused. She decided that she wanted to have a child who was born on April 12th, 2010, when she was in her first year, when Lily was in her first year of college. She'd always been a smart girl, Lily, my daughter, but she'd never applied herself in high school. She just coasted through. And having a child, a daughter, motivated her to make something of her life. She was on the dean's list all through college. And the young man eventually grew attached to his daughter and realized that he loved Lily, and they got back together. And being a mother sparked Lily's interest in children, and she enrolled in and graduated from nursing school while she was pregnant with a second child. And she completed her degree with honors, and today she's an outstanding labor and delivery nurse and has 4 beautiful children. And when she was pregnant, as a 17-year-old, everybody knew what was right for her. But I don't think she knew where she was going, but at least she had a certain conviction, and then she became really clear. And when she saw what she wanted, she went after it with a tenacity that I'd never seen in her before in her life. And now she's very successful at what she's doing and very happy at what she's doing. So we never know what's to be good and what's to be bad. We do our best. We do the best we can with the karma we have. In other words, with the hand that we've been dealt. And Bernie Glassman wrote that we take all the ingredients of our life and make the best meal possible. And then we share that meal with others. Of course, the biggest unknown we have to deal with has to do with death. We don't know when we're going to die. We don't know how we will die. And we don't know what happens when we die. I've heard many Zen teachers say that our Zen practice is to resolve the great matter of life and death. And the more that we're comfortable with living in the unknown in our life, then death was just one more step into the unknown. The thought of death becomes less threatening. It's just one more step. And as Master Jizo said, not knowing is most intimate. I've learned to be comfortable with not knowing after almost 60 years of Zen practice. And I don't have any palpable fear of death that's drawing nearer each day. Now, in the identity of relative and absolute, which we chanted this morning, it says, to encounter the absolute is not yet enlightenment. And Hakuin said, the post-Satori practice is more difficult than the pre-Satori practice. And why is that? It's because of our habit-ridden consciousness. When I started to teach Zen, I discovered that most students have emotional wounds that need to be healed, or their transcendental experiences through meditation can be distorted and even perverted. We have Zen teachers who've had profound experiences, but due to their emotional immaturity, can violate boundaries with their students and their sanghas. Having an awakening experience does not automatically erase decades of unhealthy habits and behaviors. One has to work at it. There's a term called spiritual bypassing, where one uses one's meditation to avoid emotional shortcomings. Unfortunately, the Zen that came to the U.S. from Japan did not have the techniques and upayas to deal with that issue. Most of us had to learn the hard way. In 2006, Roshi Shinko and I published the book, The Great Heart Way, in which we share the techniques we've developed to deal with emotional issues and negative behavior in the context of our Zazen practice. I learned that I have to make a conscious effort to heal negative patterns of behavior and thought. It doesn't happen just by sitting hundreds of sessions. Although sitting sessions help, they're not enough. To study Zen is to study the self. Why do I get angry? Why do I get jealous? Why do I get impatient? These are worthy topics of study in Zen practice. Watch your mind, watch your heart, watch your body when you get caught up in negative behavior. What is it that you're holding on to? Where is the attachment? It requires a constant and vigilant effort. I'm often asked how one takes one practice off the cushion in the Zendo into one's life. And it's related to the same topic. Some lines from Affirming Trust in Heart-Mind help me to do this. The first line is, do not seek for the truth, just cease to cherish your opinions. Do not seek for the truth, just cease to cherish your opinions. This circles back to my first insight, that I gain nothing, but that I let go of a lot. When we let go of our obscurations, the truth shines through. It's always shining, but our opinions, judgments, projections, unhealthy actions, words, and thoughts block the wisdom light from revealing itself. Everyone has a natural tendency to want to be right, to defend oneself from accusations, criticisms, demeaning comments. What would happen if we don't defend ourselves in our normal interactions with friends, family, and acquaintances? There's a saying, you can't argue with a fence. If there's no one there to fight with, the fight peters out. That does not mean that we don't engage. But one of the most powerful lessons in my Zen practice was the healing power of presence. If I did not believe that people can change, and if I had not seen myself and others change through engaging in this practice, I would have found something else to do long ago. For example, through my Zen practice, I was able to completely transform my relationship with my mother through the healing power of presence. She was a very controlling person and smothered her children to keep their lives within the bounds of her comfort zone. My reactions in my youth was to tune her out, and when I became old enough, I escaped her grasp. I avoided contact with her and tried to live the life I thought I wanted. But the longer I practiced Zazen, the more compassionate I became. And I felt more compassionate toward her. I realized that she was gripped by fear and was especially worried that something horrible would happen to her or her children. I began to engage her rather than tune her out. And due to the power of my pure presence, she began to relax. I even found that she had interesting things to say. With my former attitude toward her, I never would have seen that side of her. We had developed a close relationship by the time she died. And there's another line in Affirming Trust in Heart Mind that says, to enter this true empty world, immediately affirm not to. TWO, not to. When irritations arise, affirm not to. When fear arises, affirm not to. When someone annoys you, affirm not to. The same for all of your upsets, disturbances, confusion, agitations, turmoil, unease, restlessness, and so on. My affirming not to with my mother, I was able to open to a warm, loving relationship where a cold, protective interactions had been the norm. And pay attention to small things. It's important to be mindful of how you walk, how you enter a room, how you look at the person you're engaging with. Small things do matter. And yet, we have to find a balance. We can always get stuck in anything. Take care and don't hold on. It seems like it's been a long journey, but it's just one lifetime. Mine is a lifetime where I've devoted myself to clarifying the Buddha way and sharing it with others. And as my teacher told me, don't let the Dharma seed die. I hope that I've done enough to plant seeds, nurture them, and water them so that the Dharma continues. And thank you for your attention. That's all I have to say right now. So if anybody has any comments or questions, I open that up now.